Okay, happy Friday, y'all. Hope you're well, in good health, and ready to get back to it. Every single day, we're doing this 6 days a week, getting back into the Logic User Guide. I hope you have found these to be of value. I know there's a lot of gems in here. For those of you that take the time and the energy necessary to get your reps in, I'm telling you, this is going to work out in your favor drastically. So, without further ado, let's get into the process. We are covering bouncing tracks, selection-based processing, and also exporting tracks. We're going to do this in full detail. For those of you that like all the ins and outs, we're going to get right into it, okay? All right, so let's go ahead, bring you all in, and let's talk about bouncing tracks. Why are we doing this? Why are we taking the time to cover every single detail? Well, for one, if you manage to commit, discipline yourself, what's going to end up happening is that you're going to be so much better for it because you're going to understand the program in and out. You're going to have a much better workflow. And this is imperative if you really want to take your music and your career to the next level. This is number one. Number two, we all have a little bit of extra time in our hands. And so I just kind of figured this is the best time to actually do this. This is a window of opportunity for some, if you want to look at it that way. And so I choose to look at it that way. So I want to look back knowing that I did everything that I could, that I dreamed big, that I was acting bigger, right? I took chances. And so let's go ahead and make this decision now so we can look back in fondness and be like, yup, I did this. I feel great about it. Let's go. So let's get into the bouncing tracks and regions in place. We're still in chapter 4. This is now a sub-chapter within working in articulations. Let's go. You can bounce tracks or regions in place so that the resulting audio files are placed at the same position in the tracks area. You can also bounce all the tracks in a single operation. Using bounce in place, what's going to happen is it's going to process the audio or the software instrument or the drum or whatever is on the track, including the plugins, the audio file format of the bounce, the sample rate, and the resolution is set in recording preferences. Bounce in place might seem similar to the freeze function, but there are several differences, right? There are some similarities, but there are some differences. So let's check out what those are. Okay, so both of these are going to save CPU power. So that is good. Freeze allows you to return to the original state of the track and the automation data. Unlike bounce in place, freeze is in 32-bit float, safeguards against volume clipping. So this is interesting because if I go to Logic now, I want to make sure you're looking at what I'm looking at. Preferences, zoom. Yes, okay. When I go here, and let's say I create some automation like this. If I render this to audio, Control B brings me there. Also, if I open up the toolbar right here, see the icon on the top left, I can access the bounce feature. I believe you have to enable it. So my settings don't, oh, here it is, bounce regions. All right, so let me go ahead. You can see that I had some volume automation in place. And so naturally what's going to happen is this track number 4, with all of its information, with all of its plugins, with all of its panning, with all of its details, will then now be printed on track number 5. You can see the automation happening here. It's pretty clear, right? So in other words, if I did this, you could see that it's just mimicking the automation data. All right, so let's go back in time, Command Z. So some of the positives, the advantages of using freeze is that you can click on the freeze function, press spacebar. Theoretically, everything has already been printed to audio. You can see that I can no longer access this plugin, right? Because this is a frozen track. I cannot add any more plugins to the audio inserts effects. I can change the volume. I can change the pan. I can hit mute. I can hit solo. But the main difference is that if I wanted to change this automation setting, I still can. Unfreeze, go back in here, make a quick adjustment, and then freeze again. And this will save CPU power. Okay, good. Now, just to be clear, I think I might have mentioned this before, but when you freeze a file, you look at the actual folder hierarchy under freeze files. This is the track that you have just frozen. Check it out. Okay, so that's good. All right, so let's see what else the manual has for us. We're going to be bouncing a track in place, so you can render one or more selected audio files. If I select more than one, I hold Shift, you can see that everything will be bounced together. We'll go through the details of the bounce dialog window in a second. But now these two tracks have been basically compiled to make this one. So then you could theoretically delete these two to save space, screen real estate, things of that nature. Okay. The same goes for separate regions. For example, track number 3, and I know we're just going back and forth. We're not being specific, but let's say I wanted these drums here, all of these percussion instruments, track number 1, track number 2, and track number 3, to all be consolidated or bounced. I'll then mute the actual source signal, as you can see here. I'm going to mute that, and we can then apply some processing to track number 2. So then now track number 1 is muted, 2 and 3, at least between bar 13 and 18. And then here we can apply some processing. Or maybe you just want to, have like a slowdown effect just on this part, right? Oh, I'm having some buffering issues here. Okay, so then without having to create a fade for all those tracks, you could then go here and then create a fade with the slowdown effect. Control click the fade itself, slow down, see what that sounds like. So that would be the reasoning behind that. You're trying to process several regions together or tracks as a whole. I know we've spent a significant amount of time looking at the individual regions and then looking at the track as a whole, and there is a difference. We need to be clear about that when we're maneuvering through Logic. So let's look at the actual dialog window, shall we? We're going to go under Logic Pro. Let's backtrack here, Command Z this. This time I'm just going to bounce the drums. I'll just do this beat here. So I'm going to go to File, and this is just another way to skin the cat. Bounce, good. We're not going to replace all the tracks that would render everything to audio. We're just going to replace all of the regions that I have selected, or you can do the entire track. Key Command, Control Command B. Let's do the regions. Okay, we got a dialog window. So this is great. It says, hey, what would you like me to do? You want me to bounce the track that's highlighted, and do you want to create a new track? And if so, what would you like me to do with the source? Should I leave it as it is? Should I mute it, or should I delete it? Let's hit delete so you can see the actual action. In terms of your processing, you can see I have a compressor instantiated, an EQ, and a limiter on track number 1. Well, let's say I want to render everything without the effects, right? Maybe you want to try something else on. I don't know. You can basically render or burn it in the file, or you can bypass the effects plugins. Maybe you're trying to create a double, or maybe you are working on a separate section or something. Okay, we're going to leave the effects on. Now then, when we go into audio tail, now what this is pointing at is, hey, if I'm using a reverb that has a long decay, a stereo delay that has a lot of feedback. When I render your file, do I render it with all of the reverb, the decay? Do I render it with all of the stereo delay? Or do I just render it as is and disregard the audio tail? So same goes for include volume and pan. If you've made choices, it will either include those choices or not. And normalize is, I find it kind of a I don't know, somewhat controversial topic. Essentially, you're just bringing up the volume of your track. In fact, we'll do an experiment later, but right now we're just going to leave this off, and you should leave it off by default. So I'm going to call this one rendered track. So I've made a bunch of choices. I'm going to delete the source, and so then now a new track will be created. The original then is no longer there. So I'm going to hit Command Z, Control B. Let's go ahead and leave the source sound. Again, let's say you were looking to create some kind of like cool imaging trick, and the performer cannot come back and record. So then now, right, you have both of these tracks together. Or maybe you just wanted to render this to work on the intro, right? And you could do something like that. The myriad of possibilities, they never go away. I mean, it's always anything and everything you want it to be. Let's hit G to close the global tracks. But just understand that there's a dialog window and that you can utilize it to help you with your production. So right now, as it stands, I'm going to play this drum beat. Okay, you can see I have chroma verb instantiated on track 1, and you can see I have a very long decay, 57 seconds. Let's hear what that sounds like. Okay, I want to render. In fact, I'm just going to render from here. Okay, and this time I'm going to tell Logic, hey, let's include the audio tail in the file. I'm going to mute the source so you can see that it's just rendering from that selection at bar 28. I'm now rendering. Look how far it's going. Look, it just keeps burning the file because there is all the reverb, my good friends. Check it out. I might want to lower this a little bit. Okay, you understand what I'm saying, right? So now look, and it still goes on past the project end. I could extend the project end out, and it just keeps going. I mean, it was 57 seconds of a colossal reverb. Okay, well, let's delete that. Let's go back up here. We know that this region is muted. How do we know this? If you may have remembered, there is, let me see if I can point this out for you right here. Oops, hold on, Command Z that. There is right here a little dot right there. See that little dot? I went too far. And that's an indication that that region is muted. Not the track, but just that one region. So let's clear this screen. Clear. Awesome. Okay. And now let's keep going here. So this time, I'm going to Control M that. I'm going to bounce, but we're going to not include the audio tail. Okay, let's see what that sounds like. What do you know? We get all the verb here, and I'm just going to really mute this because I don't want to be bogged down by this. Check it out. And then it just stops, right? It just stops dead in its tracks because it just rendered the selection in question. So this is very powerful, and there's some other things that you could do in this menu as well. For example, if you look at the destination, right, we now have the ability to bounce in other sections. Let me show you what I mean. Okay, so you know how we have the reverb on the track, Okay. And let's say on bar 21, we want it to have no reverb, but then when it gets to bar 25, and I'm using this ridiculous amount of reverb just so we can really hear it and distinguish. So let's check out this other pattern, Control B. And then now I'm going to say, hey, this time when I bounce, do you mind, let's move it to the selected track. So we're just rendering on top of track number 1. And so why don't I call this reverb, and I will delete the previous track. So let's see what happens here. So then now I bounced, but not to a new track. I bounced to the track that was selected in the track header. So you may be asking, well, every single time I move the mouse and I click on a new track, all the tracks follow suit. They're all selected. There's a way to change that behavior. And why is this important? Well, this is important because let's say you're comping vocals and you want everything to be consolidated into a separate track. You want to bring all of the good ideas into a new track. You can do it this way. Now, you have to kind of line it up for yourself, though. So these are just tricks and tools that you're going to utilize as you understand the program. The better you comprehend it, the deeper your understanding, the more you can do with it. And so it's important not just to be musically sound, right? Have your musical chops down, but you have to have your technical chops down as well. So then from here, in the preferences, Command comma, I'm going to go into general. Then I'm going to switch over and go to editing. I'll hover down and I have a little selection here. It's two options that I really want to look at. Select regions on track selection. We're going to remove that. And select tracks on region or marquee selection. So this is cool because now I have the ability to select regions and tracks. Again, we've been saying over and over, there's a difference between the tracks and the regions. So I can select these regions and this track. And now when I bounce, Control B, and I get the bounce dialog window, I'm going to send this reverberated region into track number 2, the one that I've selected. What will I do with the original? Let's mute it by way of example. And then we're going to keep the plugins. We're going to keep the audio tail. And we're going to include the volume as well. So let's render this. Remember, it's 57 seconds. Okay, so look at this now. We took what was originally on here. Normally, this would create a new track for us, but because of the behavior that we determined inside of the preferences, we now see that we have some new functionality. We've uncovered a workflow that is just simply not possible if you skim through details. You might get lucky, but it's a must if you really want to take this serious, if you really want to be masterful to do this work. And so if you're watching this and you're curious about it, press pause, okay? Go to your DAW. Don't just listen to me. You're going to forget about 90% of all this information anyway. It's the stuff that you apply that's going to make the biggest difference. That's what's going to make the difference. Right? You can listen to all of the videos that we've done thus far for, I think it's been 2 weeks or something, 3 weeks. This is going to go on until we get to the very end. But here's my point. You have to start applying it now. Do not wait. It's better to just press pause, do the exercise, and if you're busy, go handle whatever it is you got to handle. And then you come back home, get back in the studio, and then get your reps in again. Okay? All right. So this is great. I know it's going to make a difference, and that's why I'm enthusiastic about it. Cool. Let's go back in here. So, look, we've talked about a lot of this already. The destination is you defining the track on which the bounce file is placed. Is it going to be on a new track, or will this bounce to or are you going to replace the current information? So I think the language may be a little bit different. Yeah, selected track. I think the language may have been updated here, but essentially it remains the same. The concept is the same. You can see that they have replaced track. Okay, what else we got? Includes instruments multi-outputs. Now, I didn't see this in this dialog window. There it is right there. Okay. Bounce, second loop, pass. So these are things that I'm not seeing. Maybe because I don't have a multi-instrument selected. Let me see if I can hack this really quick. It's a little bit more advanced, but we're going to try this out. Let's go to contact. Go to multi-out, 16 stereo. Okay. I guess I'll read as that's rendering or loading. It says selects to include the auxiliary channel strips with multi-output signals of the instruments in the bounce process. Otherwise, only the channel strips of tracks with the selected regions are bounced. Okay. So I wonder if this applies to the user sends. Okay, so we're going to have to check this really quick. Before I do that, let me just, okay, so this one actually has us 130 and 131. And let me just make sure that we have effects. Yes, we do. I'll hit Control B, but I still do not see this enabled. So this brings me to my question on track number 2. If we have a multi-output instrument, and this is something I'm going over quickly, but I just want to check if this is relevant or not. Hold on. Bus 1. Control B. I have to create a MIDI region. Okay, Control B. Okay, so it looks like now this is starting to show its face. So what did I do? Well, you know how you have certain instruments. In this case, I'll pull up Studio Drummer by Native Instruments. And when you select these instruments, they're just playing on a two-wave stereo file, right? It's just on. You're just hearing the left and the right channel. Well, it's possible with some of these other instruments, as you may have seen, what I did was created a track, created a contact instrument, and this is not unique to contact. Other instruments can do this as well. And I created a multi-output. And so what that gave me is the ability to create new tracks that I have nested right here. You see that little plus symbol? I know this is not part of the manual, but some of you may be interested, so I'm just going to lightly go over this. Let me create this track. Okay, so it's not working. Hold on. Okay, so if you route all of this properly, you can have all the instruments playing on these tracks as well. And so this is obviously a little bit more advanced, but you would have to do this inside of Contact and route everything here. So let's get out of here. I just wanted to make sure that we just touched on it just in case. So that is that. What else do we see that's dimmed out? Bypass effects plugins, went over that. I thought there was one more. Place track. Oh, normalization. So again, basically just leveling out the difference between the loudest and the quietest. So the only time that I would use normalization is if I recorded a signal, a vocal, something, and it came in really quietly. Then I would normalize it. So let's just pretend that these drums, for whatever reason, they come in really quiet. You see the waveforms there? It's very quiet. Now, what's interesting about the new version of Logic, inside of the Action Gear menu down here, there's a feature called auto leveling inside of the loop browser. Now, what's fascinating about auto leveling is that as soon as I drag in a region, or a loop, should I say, and I believe this is this is all kinds of loops, it will make a volume adjustment for me. So let me show you what I mean. I'm going to drag in, let me do an audio loop so we can really see it. Let me just drag in this. So if I click on here, you don't see any new information, but sometimes you'll find that some of these are louder or quieter. For example, let me drag in this one and see if there's any difference here. Okay, so look, I'm going to click on this specific region. You can see in the region inspector, it says gain negative 9.3. So it actually made some volume adjustments for me. So that's really fascinating. I'm not sure what kind of technology is behind it, but it's really cool to think that they're kind of listening and making decisions for you. I find it to be really stable. Right? Whatever algorithm they're using sounds really nice. So you can see that I've reduced the audio region here. And so the only time I would normalize is if I was going to, and let me get rid of all this processing. Look how quiet this is, okay? You can barely hear it. So in this case, I would normalize because it's very quiet. Then let me go ahead and just create a new track this time. See if we can just look at both of these side by side. And there you go. Right, you can see that very different experience here. So let's hit Command Z. A lot of decisions I made there. Hold on. Command Z, Command Z. Good. All right, cool. All right, let's go back. Went over that. Went over bounce all tracks in place. So we know we can bounce everything all at the same time. How do we do that? I'll clean this screen up a little later. Actually, let me just delete these. We go into File, Bounce, and replace all tracks. Why is this necessary? Number one, you have a collaborator and they don't have the same plugins as you do. You bounce all your stuff, leave all the MIDI, leave all the audio so they have flexibility. Then they have the track and now you can, in effect, collaborate. Number two, you're done with the song. It's complete, all post-production complete, mastering done. You may not have the same plugins a year from now. You may lose a license. You may have another computer. If you bounce and replace everything, you can save it as a project alternative and just call it bounce to audio or full render, what have you. And then now, no matter what happens, you can still access your song. Of course, it may be a little bit different. This is why I ask for you to include the original files or at least create a project alternative so you can access earlier versions if possible. But it's a very good thing to take on. So we already went through this. So we're just going to fly through it. There's nothing different about this. We talked about bouncing a region already. We know that we also have the flexibility to bounce the track itself. I find it to be not as stable. Control Command B. This is a different dialog window. Okay, so actually here's what happened here. Do you remember when we went back? Here we're bouncing regions, and maybe I didn't catch it, but the previous time we were bouncing a track. Okay, so that's why the language was a little bit different. Awesome. Glad I caught that one. So there's a difference between bouncing the region and bouncing the track. If I want to bounce the entire track, again, you can go into File, Bounce, Track in Place. Control Command B does it as well. And now we have this. Do you want to create a new track? Let's call this New. Do you want to replace what's currently on the screen? Let's try that one really quick. And then some of the same other submenus that we got before. Okay, so it rendered. Oh, I left. Oh, okay, good. And then now it basically replaced what was there before. So obviously, if you're ready to commit to audio, this is kind of the best way to go about it so that you don't have something there, right? Because if I did it the other way, Control B, I bounce something, but then there's a new track, right? It looks like this. So I recommend this methodology when it's like, I'm not sure if I fully want to commit to audio, but I definitely want to leave some processing behind, leave some plugin processing behind. So then I'll mute this track, Control H, and hide it. But again, if you still wanted to access it, it's right there. Just one more thing I want to check out is if I go back up here, Control M, Control B, and this time I hit selected track, I just wonder if this will render over itself. I just want to check this out. Now the danger with that strategy, and again, unless you did all this, it would be so hard to define this. But I bounced this region with the processing that's on this channel strip. Let me bring you in a little bit tighter so you understand what I mean. So not only did I already burn this with, let me close the screen up a little bit. Will it let me do it? Okay, so you should be looking at my channel strip. That went a little too far. Okay, good. So when I bounced that, it bounced with the gate, with the pedal board, with the amplifier, with the clip distortion, compressor, echo, spread, and channel EQ. So you can imagine the danger here, my friends, insofar as I already bounced it once. Logic doesn't know that, but it also has, let me bring you, where's Logic? Hold on. Okay, it's also treating it, again, you can see the file is still here in the background. So this is dangerous territory. Just want to make sure you know that, because if you didn't take the time, you would be essentially processing the audio twice. Once when you rendered it, and then once again while it's on the channel strip. So let me hit Command Z. Let's go back to normal here. Okay, good. All right, so again, we've talked about the difference between bouncing a track or bouncing a region as well. All right, we're going into selection-based processing. Let me delete some stuff here. Okay, so why would we use selection-based processing? Well, have you ever been in the midst of working on something, perhaps CPU is just going nuts, right? It's just a super CPU heavy track. Then you just freeze everything and you're trying to kind of manage the whole project. You're bouncing some stuff to audio. Selection-based processing allows you to take pre-configured, pre-made effects that you define. I think there's a couple stock ones as well. And render something in real time. For example, if you know you want some finger snaps and you want to have a lot of verb on them, you can render the snaps in real time without having to instantiate the channel strip with the reverb. So why would you use a reverb if you know you're going to make this decision like every other session? Why would you have to reinstantiate it, go into the plugin, raise up decay to 50, right? Why would you do that? Selection-based processing is something that you can set up in advance, so you can render audio MIDI quickly and effortlessly. Okay, I'm going to show you the system. It's really great. I use it for things like declicking. I use it for things like reverb, delay, softening, low cut, high cut, things like that. Things I know that I want to commit to, and I don't want a lot of brain power, and I don't want a lot of steps. Okay, so let's go into selection based processing. Here we go. All right, we're in the manual, not there, but there. While working in the tracks area, you can apply one or more audio effect plugins to selected audio regions or to marquee selections of audio regions. So you don't have to just select the regions, you can also just create a marquee selection. You can preview the result, there's a preview function, and make further adjustments before applying the resulting changes to the selection. Effects can include both plugins included with Logic Pro and third party. That's really cool. So if you always like to use a plugin, but It's very CPU heavy. You can have it instantiated and render things in real time. If you have used Pro Tools, just think of Audio Suite. It's the same concept. You can apply effects to a selection, create a new take with the process files as well. So that's a good thing to remember. When processing a marquee selection, you can maintain the original region borders or create a new region containing the process marquee selection. Both split marquee borders and create new takes are selected. They're going over some of the functionality here. Okay. The created take folder contains only the marquee selection. If split and marquee borders are not selected, or for take folder rather than region. Okay. So we're going to go over this. Let's keep moving here. The selection-based processing window includes two separate sets of plugins marked A and B. We're going to switch back and forth between those two. And again, we'll create some presets while we're at it. You can also apply selection-based processing when working in the audio track editor. We're just going to do this in the tracks area today. Okay, so here's what it looks like. So in order for this to be called upon, you have to have something selected. It won't work unless you actually select something, okay? So we're going to either create a marquee selection, select the region, and we're going to go to functions, selection-based processing. Let's go from there. Okay, so let's see. So I've got audio selected, and I have this set up to a key command. Okay. I go up here, selection, base processing. I'm pretty sure this is default. It's been a while since I've set it up, so please check on your own. You can see that my option command B shows and it hides selection-based processing. If you've been watching from the beginning, you may remember that selection-based processing is something that you can find inside of the mixer. This is kind of a hidden track that's in the background at all times. So if I go to, where is my preview track? Hold on, I'll find out just by clicking on it. Oh, turn off that reverb. Okay, so you can see down here in the mixer, there's a track called preview. Okay, so when we select audio, okay, and we start to utilize some of this stuff, like this is one of the presets that I've made. Let me just preview really quick. Okay, good. And hold on. All right, so then I'm gonna render that. So, well, hold on, wait a second. To my last point, selection-based processing is right here in the mixer. Okay, you can see it says selection-based processing A. Let me see if I can widen up this mix a little bit. In the mixer, there are these two buttons that allow you to kind of stretch out the columns. Yeah, selection-based processing here and here. Okay, so then what I'll do here is I'll render using selection-based processing A. So this is all happening in the background. If I select another preset, you can see that it's just taking this existing preset without having to populate this for my entire sessions. I mean, look at the mixer, guys. See how it has all of these plugins kind of sucking energy, right? Let's say you work on this track for 60 hours. It's just pulling, it's just adding weight. So this allows you the opportunity to not do that. This is why bouncing to audio is so good, right? So then I'll take this, we'll preview it. And let's say you love the sound. Let's do something that sounds a little bit more obvious. Let's do this one here. Cool. I dig it. I'm going to apply. This will render to audio, but on the track itself. Okay. Let's say we wanted to create a new take. Let's try it. Okay, so then now it's created a take folder in essence. I've got track number 1, which is the original. Let me hit solo. Well, that's pretty cool because now you really start adding some dynamics. So why don't I go ahead and select something else. Let's do like some distortion or something. All right, I'm going to create a new take rather. I'm not going to add the effects tail. Gain change. Let's just do loudness compensation. So, let's see. Here again. I guess it doesn't let you render after the one take. That's interesting. I wouldn't imagine why. Let's read more about that. Let me Command Z this. Yeah, so you get one new take of that. Well, in all fairness, I mean, I guess it's probably a good idea. I mean, you think about it, like, what if you still wanted the original idea for some reason, right? You still wanted to apply it, maybe down the road somewhere. So, okay, cool. That's a cool idea. So then now, why are there two? Why is there an A and why is there a B? Well, the reason that is because you can now test out different sounds. So let's move away from this. Okay, so I'll try out, let's say, Filter Jam by Audio Thing on the left-hand side. And on the right side, I will try out, let's do Speaker by Audio Thing. And so we're going to preview one against the other. Let's say you're in love with the speaker, we could then apply. And now you're all good to go. You've got speaker rendered. When you get rid of selection-based processing, the plugins are still here because this is happening in the background. So I'm going to hit Option Command B. This brings up the window again. Okay, and if you want to clear those plugins, you're going to have to kind of go back to the beginning here. So let's see if we can remove all effects plugins. That removes it for side B. Let's do the same here. Remove all. This is a genius feature from Logic. I really like it. If you haven't utilized it yet, it should become your best friend. Again, you want to learn a little bit more about it, go to selection-based processing here. Okay. In the manual, they suggest you do this in the audio file editor functions. Was it here or was it in the other? Oh, let's read that. It says in the track area or the audio track editor rather here, functions selection-based processing. So however you want to do it, the benefits of using the audio track editor, of course, is that you can kind of make kind of more sound decisions based on the screen. It looks a little easier to kind of manipulate. So we can click on that, hit Control M. Let's say we wanted to add some reverb just to this. Then I would hit Control Command B. Then I would go into let me do delay. Let's do reverb. And let me just hear the preview. I'm hearing no preview. Let's just hit apply, see what happens. Oh, did I get rid of, hold on, 3. Check 1, 2. It's acting a little funny right now, but that's kind of the idea, is that you could now process individually inside of the audio track editor. Let me see. Let me just try this one more time. I'll take this snare. Okay, it seems to be working now. I'm going to add the effect. Cool. So look at that. So just a more defined way of editing something. You could also do it in the tracks area. That's fine, but you just get a little bit more to work with here. So let's hit E, close the audio track editor, hit Z to get a better view of everything. Command Z a couple times to clean up this mess. All right, S takes me out of solo mode or solo track, return, playhead to the beginning. Okay, so this is great. We haven't talked about the marquee selection and how that affects it. Let's say I wanted to affect just the first bit here. Control Command B brings me in here. Let's do delay. And so now is when we get to utilize split at marquee borders. So let's utilize that. We'll hit apply. Okay, good. Let's see what we got here. Yeah, so that got a little bit wonky there. Let's check out that feature and see what that means exactly. So we got well, it's interesting. It looks like you can also control click a selected region and choose processing, apply selection based processing from the shortcut menu. So here, processing selection based. Okay. So lots of good stuff there. See, to select the active process, click on or off. So in other words, are we going to use process A or process B? Set A or set B? Which one is going to be used? And there's an on button right next to both of these to enable them or not. Okay. To apply complete channel strip setting to the specific selection, choose a setting from the channel strip. Okay. So there are some presets in here already. I didn't really like many of these, so I just made my own here. But let's go to Effects, Stutter, Slow. And you can see they've done some work for you here. This is version A. Let's go to version B now. We know that this is another track inside the mixer. And we'll try out Effects, Stutter, Fast. And now you can go back and forth between both of these sets. Okay, to add a plugin, you would apply the same behavior as usual. To create a new audio region containing the selected portion of a marquee selection, select, okay, so I want to think about this. To create a new audio region containing the selected portion of a marquee selection. Okay, so let's just try this one more time. I'll try just the beginning. Actually, let me just do... Okay, let me create a new take, apply. Yeah, I mean, I don't understand the difference between that and say, let's just not do that and then hit apply. It's still, oh, okay, it's doing the, I see what's going on. So if I create a marquee selection, I thought it was just going to process the selection, but in order for that to happen, you need to turn this on. So can you only process the marquee selection is the way that I would have worded it, but that's neither here nor there. But we're here. If I don't have this enabled, it looks like the entire region is processed. Yeah. So I don't understand why that happens. A workaround is simply to create your marquee selection, click on the region itself, and then just hit apply. And that will work just fine as well. Okay, let's keep going here. To create a new take containing an audio file with the changes, okay, we discovered that. Now what I was checking on is, can I do more than one take? Because that would be insane. To extend the length of the created file, include any instrument release and potential effects tails. So just as we were talking about before, my good friends, if you add the effect tail, you're going to have more to work with, depending on if you're using a spatial effects tool. To set the gain compensation, choose a setting. No change means it's just going to be what it is. If we compensate for loudness, it's going to alter the level of the process signal to match the perceived loudness of the unprocessed signal. So if you have a compressor, for example, in fact, this is probably even worth doing in all fairness. Let me go to Dynamics. Let me go to Punchy Drums. And I will create no change for the first take. Okay, so you could see that it literally brought up the loudness, right? I'm going to hit apply. Boom. Okay, so then if I then say, hey, let's compensate for the loudness, you can see that it's a little different. It's not kind of it's not giving you that same processing. Let's do overload protection. Okay, that looked kind of like the first one. See, I would have thought loudness compensation would have looked a little bit different in all fairness. Let's go to no change. Okay, so let's get some more information here. When we use, loudness compensation alters the level of the process signal to match the perceived loudness of the unprocessed. So theoretically, if I choose no change, it's just going to, get louder or sound the way it's going to sound. Let's listen to this. If I hit apply, so that just pretty much sounded the same. Sounds a little bit more squash, but generally the loudness level is the same. If I then go into loudness compensation, let's hear this without and with. So that's what it's kind of trying to make it sound the same with the effects as the original source signal. Okay. Normalize increases or decreases the process signal to the highest possible level without causing clipping. To preview the changes, we see a little green button on the side. By default, the preview is solo. To hear the preview together with the project, choose preview, enable solo from the action pop-up menu to deselect it. Hold on. Okay, so if I hit preview, it's going to, let's check this out. I'm going to solo the region. So it looks like Logic, if I look at the LCD screen, goes into solo mode. That's some detailed stuff. If I hit the action gear menu, though, you say, hey, can you not preview with solo? Can you preview with the song? That's pretty sweet. So now you're checking what this sounds like along the track. Hold on, let me select that one. Here we go. Very cool. What else we got? Apply the current selection-based processing again. Okay, we can go back to functions and then apply it again. So let's say you weren't happy with the first take. I know I do this a lot with softening something or declicking something. So here I have, it looks like I need to I just downloaded RX8. Here, let me just go ahead and do that on camera. So here, where's isotope? Okay, good. RX8, declick. Let's go stereo. Awesome. I'll save this. This is actually a good chance to save this. So let's click on the channel strip. Let's go to save channel strip setting as. This is for selection-based processing. We're going to call it declick, and we're just going to replace what used to be RX7. Cool. So if I wanted to process this again, and then there's a key command to actually do this automatically. So apply selection-based processing again. And so literally we'll just do it over and over until you get the right situation. Once you find something that you're comfortable with, then you move on. It says here, if I control-click the region, you can also access this from the shortcut menu under processing. Apply it again, right? So it just depends how you want to utilize this. Apply the current selection. You can use, there's a key command for it as well. Here. Apply selection-based processing again. Awesome. Okay, it looks like we went over regions or marquee selections and how that works. Okay, that looks good. To select the active process, left or right, we talked about that. To add plugins, we talked about that. We talked about all this functionality. What is this? Oh, wait, we just did that. We just see if there's anything else. Okay, exporting files. Let's do this now. We'll take a quick little break, and then we'll get back into it. Okay, good. All right. Yeah, I often do that. I think it's a good idea to take breaks, kind of show people. I remember when I first started doing this, I've only been doing this for 7 years, doing this work for 7 years. And remember when I first started, I had no technical experience, and everything was just challenging, right? Just understanding the concepts, listening to the lingo. It was just all so challenging and difficult. I mean, just to grasp one sentence, guys, I would just go through it over and over again. And then what was even more confusing still was the fact that you would go into different forums or you would go to different channels and people were using different terminology. And it was just very confusing to navigate the waters. And so it feels really great to be here with you and kind of lock in definitions and lock in certain terms so that you're clear, so you can operate with efficiency. The last thing you want is, you're trying to get ahead and it just takes you 100, steps to get to, nowhere, right? We want to make sure that you're always moving forward and you're doing so in an expedient manner, right? We're just moving quickly and efficiently. So we're going to be talking about exporting tracks. It's funny because when I got on here, I was like, all right, cool. This will be about 20 minutes. It's kind of easy stuff. But when you start looking at the level of detail that it takes, and I surely don't want to just, pass this moment by. I want to really take advantage of it. I know this is, probably not going to happen, well, for sure, in this way ever again. And so I figured if we're going to do this, we're going to invest this time, these energy, these resources, that we're going to do it the right way. So let's get into exporting tracks and why is this important. We know that if you're collaborating it's going to be extra important, but there may be some material here that helps you with business. I know that several times I've had to export, not bounce, but export stems to clients, and so we should take the time and energy necessary to learn this. Here we go. Here. All right. Let's go. You can export one or more selected tracks as audio files, or export all tracks as audio, software instrument, and drummer tracks. All right, that's good. Oh, and actually, you know what? Before we start this, I kind of noticed something, and I think it's important to kind of just say these things as they come up, because I believe that all real learning is experiential. I don't care how many times you read the book. But as I was bouncing to selection-based processing, I noticed that this is only something that can be utilized if you're using audio, Now, I'm not sure what the deal is with that. Unless I skipped over it, I did not see it in the manual, but maybe we should just go over just the first little bit here. It says, working the tracks area, you can apply one or more audio effects, but we know that audio effects can be played on MIDI to selected audio regions or to mark key selections. Okay, so it actually does say there. I just skipped over it. It's just weird to me that you wouldn't be able to do that with MIDI. But I guess it's not an audio track, so there you go. So anyway, just wanted to make sure that I was clear about that. So if you ever did want to apply selection-based processing with a MIDI track, why don't you go ahead and bounce to audio, then go into there, and then apply the processing. All right, I just want to get that out of the way. If I see something and I think it's worth mentioning, I really want to kind of do right by you, and so let's just kind of go over. Let's do the best we can here. All right. Exporting, good. All right, so we're gonna export selected tracks as audio files. We're gonna choose the file format, choose the bit depth, the range. Are we gonna do from bar 1 to bar 60, the entire track from project start to project end? Looks like the multi-output software instrument option is back. I definitely would love to learn more about this, so I'm gonna highlight this. Maybe run some tests when we're done here. Bypass the effects plugins as we've mentioned before. Let's say you need to send somebody dry stems and wet stems, right? You would send them both. And you can bypass the effects plugins to send those over. Include the audio tail. We've gone over that on more than one occasion. If you plan to use exported regions with an external app for processing, mixing, or editing, exporting them with no volume and pan automation is generally desirable. So let's say you're going into Ableton or Pro Tools, it's probably best to not include volume and pan, right? Let the mixer or the collaborator determine how they're going to position these in the stereo image. We've talked about normalizing. If you're going to use overload protection, it says allows downward normalization in case of overload. So if anything, I would assume it's like a limiter. It's not going to bring any clipping. No normalization. Okay, good. Select the add resulting files to. Okay, and this is basically going to, as I understand it, bring it back into the project to create a. Wait, am I on the right? Nope. Hold on. So it's going to take what you've exported, bring it back inside into the project audio browser to add to the session. So let's say I export. Here, let's just try a quick experiment. Let's call this test 1. I will do the same inside of here. Test 1. Okay. And then I export this one. Command, well, let's just go into the menu bar, export. I'm going to export just this one file. Okay. We get this window. For now, I'm just going to keep it easy. We're going to go over these details in a second, but I just want to show you what this looks like. See, add resulting files to project browser. Now I'm going to export this to my desktop, but it's also going to create a copy of that inside here. See how it says test 1 here? Right, that is that file and the additional file that I just rendered here. Okay. So let's see, what else do we got to do here? Select it. Yep, we did that. To specify the file name patterns. So I'll show you how to do that in a second. And we also have a way, and we won't go over the secondary way, but we can export everything all at the same time. You do one track or a couple of tracks, or select everything all at the same time. Okay, it looks like we can also export regions. So let's just do all tracks really quick. I think that'll be a little bit better. Make Command Z here a couple of times. All right, Command A, file, export, all tracks audio files. I have somebody that I collaborate with, but he uses another DAW. We go to all tracks as audio files. Okay, inside of the session, if I were you, I would go into the bounce folder and I would create 2 folders, one called dry, and then you might want to go back in time. New folder, one called wet. And let's go back again. I love this hierarchy, how they do this. It's really great. Okay, so then inside of the wet folder, the range is either all of the session, right? Extend the file length all the way to the project end. Trim silence at file end. So I would assume this means when there's no longer any music, it's just going to start naturally fading. We're going to try it out. And then the cycle range only. Now, if you're collaborating with somebody like on Pro Tools or something, it's super important to hit Command A, Command U. And then to extend the cycle range, maybe not necessarily in the beginning, you can, but the idea is that when they drag these stems into their DAW, you want it to be clean, right? Uniform. Everything should line up perfectly. And so then now, when I hit Command A, we're going to extend. File will go all the way to the project end. I could see my project end in the LCD custom screen up here is bar 47. So let's just do that for now. Well, let's try a trim silence at file end. I'm curious how this works. And one more thing, I'm curious as to, like, if I select nothing, how it then behaves. So let's just try this out really quick. Good. We're going to save a WAV file. You can also use these 2 formats, but I find that this is the most efficient. It contains some metadata that's useful as well. We're not going to bypass the plugins because this is in fact inside of our wet folder, as I have. Wait a minute, is that the wrong? No, that was the wrong one. This one. Bounces wet. Good. Let's see here. Normalize always off unless, like we talked about before, if it's too quiet, then I don't want to include these in my project, the one I'm currently working on. And let's go through the file name. So let's see. I want the track name to be first, or I can have the project name right before that. So the name of this is Logic Pro with Eddie Gray. And I can have the track name, and then maybe I'll have the track number right in between those two. So I don't need the bar range, I don't need increments. Maybe I'll put the year at the end just for fun. So if I look at the file name example, you can see it says Logic Pro with Eddie Gray, right? And then there's the track number. Let me hit Command Z. Okay, good. So that's how it's going to look on the individual stem or file. You got to be careful with how you want this. There's a custom tab as well. Let's say we had a group or something, and you know, we wanted to call ourselves something like you know, whatever. So then you would use the custom tab right at the beginning. And so that's going to name everything appropriately. And so then when I hit export, all of that will go inside here. So let's go ahead and hit that. There's just something just worth mentioning. It's not including any mastering. So any processing that you have on the stereo out, not being included, okay? This is just the files themselves with the plugins. If you didn't bypass them, it's going to bring everything in. Let that render. And you can also do that with exporting audio or MIDI regions to reuse in Logic Pro or use with another audio app. We talked about that. Any fades are included in the exported audio file. That's pretty cool. Wow, this looks like an old version of Logic here. So this still applies if you want to just export one region. So if I go to File, Export, you can export just a region if you wanted to. One region as an audio file. You can export MIDI files as well. That would be done there. One track as an audio file. All of the audio files, all of the MIDI, all together. So that's good. And if I then go, let me go ahead and mute all these. go here. Go into our folder that we made, bounces, wet. Here's everything. Let's drag it in. It's very important that you drag it in and create new tracks. And it says here, all selected files or stems are from one project. Yes, they are. Logic starts to analyze the transients, line everything up. Cool. So what's interesting is, depending on the file, because we chose the option to trim silence at file end, kind of creates this natural fade for tracks. That's pretty cool. Had you selected the other ones, it wouldn't look like that. For example, if you would have selected export cycle range, it would do it from bar 0 to bar, I forgot where we were, but yeah. And then same thing here, extended file, and it would just go all the way to the end. In my case, bar 47. Okay, so let's just see what this sounds like. All right, pretty cool. All right, let's wrap it up here. If we're moving audio files used for audio regions, you can move audio files used for audio regions to a new location. This is useful if the audio files are saved in the project or are referenced outside in multiple locations. When you select one or more audio regions and choose Move Files, all audio files used for the selection regions are moved to the location you choose. Both audio files stored in a project. I don't recommend you do this. I recommend you always keep everything the same. Just keep everything consolidated. But still, just for the sake of just looking at this, I don't see a move. Right, this may be control click, export. Hold on, let me just make sure. Export. Export as audio file, move files. So here's what they're talking about, except I just don't know how to locate this. I've never seen it before. When you select one or more regions and choose move files, all audio files used for the selected regions are moved to the location you choose. Both audio files stored in the project and audio files referenced from outside the project. So that one, I don't get, to be honest. I don't understand what that one's for. All right. So we can export MIDI files, prepare MIDI regions for export, and okay, let's go over these two. Let's see. If you wanted to export MIDI to play in another app, if your project contains only MIDI regions, you can merge the regions and export the entire project as a MIDI file before exporting. Okay, so let's go ahead and highlight that. Where was that? Here. So there is a little bit of a setup, apparently. Because standard MIDI file type 0 format files can only save a single MIDI region, you must also join MIDI regions you want to export as a MIDI file in a file format. You can do this by selecting, okay, interesting. So let's try this. I don't have a lot of MIDI on here. Let me just convert some stuff to MIDI. One sec. So let's get these guys. Convert to MIDI. Okay. So then we're going to control click the regions and we're going to choose MIDI. Normalize region parameters from the shortcut menu. Control click MIDI. Okay, let's try this out. This is definitely new to me. What did they say? MIDI? Yeah, MIDI. Don't see that. Select the MIDI regions. Wait a minute. Control click. Then choose MIDI. Normalize region from the shortcut menu. Okay, so let's go here. I guess that would. Yeah, I don't see that. This is the shortcut menu. Control click contextual menu. I don't see the word MIDI. Normalize region parameters from the shortcut menu. Control click the regions and choose MIDI. Apply quantization permanently from the shortcut menu. Apply MIDI? Yeah, I don't see that either. If you see something different, wait, what about there? All right, cool. Apply quantization permanently. Oh, that's pretty sweet. You can actually embed this. Okay. Oh, okay. I see what's going on. So when you do export the MIDI, everything is rendered accordingly. Awesome. So let's go export MIDI. What was the first thing they said? Replace MIDI. Okay, hold on. Let me see what that first thing was. Normalize region parameters. Normalize region parameters. That one I don't see in this menu. But anyway, we got applying quantization permanently. Okay, let's keep trying to follow this. Convert any aliases. We don't have any aliases, so we're going to move on. Convert all loops into regions. We're good. Convert all MIDI regions on a track by edit. Okay, so now they want us to join by hitting join, or I believe that's Command J. Okay, so we're going to wait, but is it all together? Convert all MIDI regions on each track into a continuous MIDI region. Well, yeah, so I'm not sure if they mean track by track or quite literally just everything all together like that. I guess it would be like that. Let's see what that sounds like if I played that back. Yeah, not a bad idea. Okay, cool. So yeah, this is I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to create the file so that when I bring it into another session, all the work's been done for you. So let's see, convert all MIDI regions on each track into a continuous MIDI region. We just did that. Insert all instrument MIDI settings as events by choosing functions. Insert instrument MIDI settings as events from the tracks area menu bar. So insert all instrument MIDI settings as events by going to functions here. Okay, great. So that was here. Wish that was all just in one menu. Export one or more MIDI regions as standard MIDI files. Okay, so we're going to select the MIDI regions. Why don't we just do all of them? Go to File, Export. And are we doing all MIDI tracks as MIDI files? Or selection as MIDI file. I'm pretty sure that's what it said. Where am I? Export selection as MIDI file. Choose a death hardware sequencer. You may need to limit the file name to 8.3 character. Wow, that's interesting. All right, so let's go ahead and just call this MIDI. I'm going to send this to my desktop. All right, so here we go. Moment of truth. That's pretty cool. And it looks flawless. I mean, of course, it's not the instruments that I initially selected, but that's because it's MIDI. But here I'm curious to see if had we not run that whole protocol, like for example, I had, just brought in a bunch of random stuff over here. And I just was to, I didn't run through that whole protocol, right? I just hit command, wait, I'm looking for, let's see, file, export as MIDI file. Let's go to command D, hit test 2. It will bring this in. Let's just compare it. So, okay, that was way more valuable than I thought. So the difference here is that if you go through that protocol, and I'm going to highlight that whole thing because I found it to be really useful, this whole bit. If you do this and you prepare it, when you drag it in to another DAW or even Logic, it knows how to settle into a session. I'm sure this has happened to you, especially people who are seasoned. You drag in a MIDI file, think of like Machine or something, and it's all over the place. So I can clearly see that's what's happening here. If you don't prepare for export, then it's not going to fit, essentially. So that's some cool stuff. Let me go ahead and delete that. So I guess you can also export single MIDI regions as a format 0 MIDI file. So I don't even know what that is, but I'm assuming it's just one file, selection as a MIDI file. Choose the destination directory, enter a name, then click save. The selected MIDI region is saved as a format 0 MIDI file. So apparently there's something to the formats in how you export the MIDI. And I believe it's way more important than I initially thought. This right here was a game changer for me. I definitely have come across some of this stuff and didn't even know that this was how you fixed it. So kudos. Okay, last one, editing the track parameters. Parameters available depend on the track type. Some parameters are common to all track types, while some are specific to audio tracks or software instrument tracks. So I believe we're talking about the region and track inspector, so we're going to look at that right now. What is the functionality? Well, it looks like we have in the, let's do here. The track inspector, we have the icon, which we can select here. You have the channel, MIDI channel, ability to transpose, velocity, determine the key limit. So if you want to be within a certain range, velocity limit, if you want it to play a certain degree of loudness, you can do that. So here, I'm curious about this. If I say I only want the velocity limit to be 127, right? You're hearing one performance. If I drop this down, so that kind of determines what's going to be played back. I wonder if I could do that really quick with, hold on. Because it depends on the kind of MIDI that you have. But here, let's keep going. MIDI channel pop-up menu. Choose the MIDI channel for the track output. When set to all MIDI events are sent with the original channel settings. I don't think that's something you'll be touching. Freeze. This is something we went over before, still kind of working through it. Choose source only to freeze the track signal without effect plugins. Okay, choose pre-fader. Okay, let me just try this because I wonder if I can still process if I freeze the track without effects plugins. So let's try this. So we're here. I've got distortion 2. I decide to render in source. Here. Okay, I'm going to freeze. So this was something that I was questioning like a couple chapters ago, and it's like, well, what is the difference between one and the other? So I can still process here. If I go to pre-fader, I believe that this is going to change, but let's double check to be sure. Okay, so that's the difference. See, had I not carried on and continued to move forward, regardless if you understand every single detail or not, these things start to surface. They start to reveal themselves to you. So the difference between freezing in pre-fader or source is that in pre-fader, I can no longer access the plugins themselves. I can only access volume, mute, and solo. Whereas if I freeze in source only mode, I can still access the plugins. So that's just an amazing concept altogether, that you could even do this. So that's great. There's a cue reference checkbox. This is for audio only. All the regions on the track contribute their transients as reference points during the quantization process. So again, these are things you probably wouldn't necessarily look at unless you take the time to look at them. So we're here. There's a cue reference button. Notice that it's not on until we start to quantize. I still see it dim though. So let's figure that one out. Always something else to figure out. There's something there. Oh, I wonder if it has to do with. No, I don't see that. Okay. So that's the next thing that we will sort out. Why isn't this on? How do I turn on cue reference? Yeah, let's keep going. So, and I, you know what? I think this has to do with groups now that I think about it. Let me just check one thing. Let me create a quick group. Okay. So let me just make one quick setting here, here. So unless, hold on, wait, where is it? Cue reference. Okay, yeah. So you see that, again, I'm putting together all of these different concepts that I've learned throughout the years. I've read like 10 manuals for Logic. So cue reference has to do with a group setting. And again, this, my understanding may be contextual based on the 7 years that I have been doing this. But it looks like when you're doing group editing, then you can utilize cue reference. And again, because it's not mentioned, it could be confusing, especially if you're a newbie trying to make yourself through this manual. And so I'm glad that we get to kind of look at some of these things together and see like, okay, this is a group function, right? Flex pop-up mode, right? This is for audio only. What kind of flex mode are we going to use to process this track? So are we going to use automatic? We're going to let Logic make the decision for us. Should we use something like rhythmic, which is really good for guitar tracks, right? Should we quantize at a rate of eighth notes? This is maybe a little bit faster pace. What else do we have here? Decay, loop offset. Let's look into some of this stuff. So depending on which flex mode is chosen, other parameters may or may not become available. Okay, we have transposition, which we know is like one semitone up or down, so that's basic. Velocity value slider, obviously just for MIDI. That's pretty cool. I never realized there was a velocity slider in here. Well, I see velocity. I don't see a slider. Is it the same thing? I'm assuming they mean velocity. Yeah. All right, let's move on. Key limit. Click and hold the lower upper value, drag it up or down. The two values together define the key range. Any notes outside this range are not played. Right? So if you just wanted to hear a couple notes, or you wanted to have the bass playing on the left hand and the piano playing on the right hand, let's look at this one. This is the one that I was checking out earlier. Click and hold the lower upper value. Two values together define the velocity range, and any notes with a velocity outside this range are not played. That is weird because I tried that and it didn't work. Let's try that one more time. I'll try it here. Let me try the velocity. Let's do everything below 70. Whoa, hold on. Everything below 70. And then above 50. Let's see if this actually works. This is actually being frozen right now. Hold on. Cool. So yeah, it's actually working. Nothing that is being played with in this range is audible. We can't hear. It's not until we open up the velocity. I'm personally finding like a struggle to understand why you would need that. It could be creative as well. You know, like if I go to this track and I start to limit the range, it's like we might get a different kind of performance. What's weird is it's not working here for some reason, and I can't exactly understand why. Maybe because it's a track stack. Again, guys, there's so many details with these programs, and sometimes there's just some gray. There's just a little bit of gray, and you just have to kind of keep moving. All right, so there's a delay value slider for software instruments. I love this because you can have your track on the grid quantized, but you can have it either be delayed forward or back a little bit. So for this one, I want the bass to be kind of lagging, and so I'm just going to move the bass over it a little bit. Now, it's still on the grid, it's still on the screen, but you can see that we want to move things over a little bit. So here, check it out. I might have a delay of 8 seconds on the bass. Let's make it a little bit harder. Let's go to 15. So 0 would sound like this. Right, very on the money. If you want to change up your feel, you never know, it might be a difference maker. Let's go with 20 milliseconds. I personally like it on some of those hits for sure. So that's delay. No transpose when selected regions on the track are not transposed. In other words, the transpose region parameter is ignored. This can be useful for instruments assigned to drum or other samples mapped across the keyboard on a single MIDI channel. Good. No reset. What does that mean? When selected, no reset messages are sent to the track's instrument. This can be useful when using controllers for non-musical purposes, such as mixer automation. That is an interesting concept. I never really thought about that. That's cool. I dig it. All right. I think that's good. Staff style and articulation setting. We already talked about that. Wow. That was absolutely epic on page 231. If you're enjoying yourself on this journey, I know it's a lot, but you'll get through it and you'll keep learning. And this will be the basis for your foundation for years and years and years to come. So I appreciate you. I applaud you, and I will see you tomorrow.